There is someone in your life right now who is slowly draining you. Not an enemy, not a stranger, someone you trust, someone you might even love. And the terrifying part is, you probably defend them. You make excuses for them. You blame yourself after conversations with them. You feel exhausted in ways you cannot explain. And when someone asks you why, you cannot find the words. Most people think manipulation looks like obvious control, a raised voice, a clear threat, something you can point to and say, there, that is the problem. But the manipulation that actually ruins lives does not announce itself. It arrives softly. Wears the face of someone who cares about you. And by the time you recognize it, years have passed, opportunities are gone. Your confidence has quietly been carved away, and you handed them the knife, without ever knowing you were holding it. What you are about to hear is not a list of villains to avoid. It is a mirror, and some of what you see in it may be uncomfortable. Stay with that discomfort. It means you are paying the right kind of attention. Most people approach this topic the wrong way. They look outward. They search for the manipulator in their life like they are hunting a predator with obvious markings. And because they are searching for something obvious, they miss what is actually happening. Here is the hidden mistake. Manipulation is not always intentional. Some of the most destructive. People in your life do not wake up planning to damage you. They are not consciously evil. They are running patterns, psychological patterns formed from their own wounds, their own fear, their own unresolved chaos, and you are simply caught in the radius. That distinction matters, because it changes the question. The question is not only who is trying to hurt me. The real question is, whose presence consistently diminishes who I am. Most people think awareness means identifying bad people, but the truth is, awareness means recognizing patterns that pull you away from your own clarity, your own growth, and your own sense of self. You are not here to build a wall around yourself. You are here to build discernment, and discernment begins with understanding the 7 psychological archetypes that, without intervention, will quietly dismantle the life you are trying to build. Here is the bold truth about the first type. They love you, and that love is exactly what makes them dangerous. The Comfort Saboteur is someone, a parent, a childhood friend, a long-term partner, whose identity is tied to keeping you close, not maliciously, but deeply. Their emotional security depends on you remaining in a version of yourself they recognize. The psychology behind this is rooted in what researchers call identity threat. When you grow, when you change careers, develop new values, pursue unfamiliar ambitions, it implicitly challenges their own stagnation. Your evolution becomes a mirror they do not want to look into. So what do? They do not block you directly. They ask subtle questions that plant seeds of doubt. Are you sure that's realistic? I just worry about you. You used to be so different. Every word wrapped in apparent care. The common mistake is interpreting their concern as wisdom. You think, they know me well. Maybe they see something I do not. The correction is this. Learn to separate love from authority. Someone can genuinely love you and still be genuinely wrong about what you are capable of. Their fear is real. Their ceiling is not yours. Stop seeking permission from people whose permission is unconsciously conditional on you staying the same. The second type does not compete with strangers. They compete with you specifically, and they do it in ways that are almost impossible to name without sounding petty. When you share good news, there is always something slightly deflating in there. Response, a pause, a pivot back to themselves, an achievement of their own that suddenly needs mentioning. They celebrate you with an asterisk. The psychology here involves what is called comparative identity. Some people can only feel significant in relation to others. They do not pursue excellence for its own sake. They pursue it as a positioning mechanism. And because you are close to them, you are the primary reference point. The mistake most people make is normalizing this dynamic. You stop sharing your wins. You shrink your excitement before it leaves your mouth. You subconsciously protect yourself by becoming less, and you tell yourself that it's called humility. That is not humility. That is suppression under social pressure. Notice who you edit yourself around. Notice the topics you avoid, the achievements you downplay, the excitement you swallow. That editing is not modesty. It is a signal. When your growth consistently triggers someone's insecurity, you eventually stop growing around them. And if they are in your inner circle, you stop growing entirely. Pay close attention to this next one, because this type activates your deepest compassion, and that is precisely the mechanism of their influence. The permanent victim has a story. It is a compelling story, and in their story, they are always the one wronged, always the one suffering, always the one that the world conspired against, not occasionally, perpetually. The psychology is this: victimhood, when it becomes an identity rather than a circumstance, functions as a form of control. It is not always conscious. but it creates an invisible obligation in people nearby. You feel guilty for your own stability. You feel responsible for their pain. You begin reshaping your behavior to avoid becoming another chapter in their story of betrayal. The common mistake is confusing empathy with endless accommodation. Genuine compassion does not require you to carry someone else's narrative indefinitely. There is a difference between supporting someone through hardship and becoming the emotional infrastructure for someone who has decided hardship is who they are. Ask yourself, does this person ever move? Not perfectly, not immediately, but over time. Are they interested in agency? Are they curious about change? Or does every attempt to offer perspective get redirected back to evidence of their suffering? Someone who is genuinely struggling will usually, at some level, want a way out. Someone who has made suffering an identity will subtly resist every exit. Protect your empathy. It is not an infinite resource, and some people are not using it to heal. They are using it to anchor you. Here is where it starts to get deeper. The next type is one most people never identify because it hides behind the appearance of genuine connection. This person makes you feel profoundly understood. At first, they reflect your values back to you. They seem to think the way you think. They finish your sentences. They validate your frustrations with surgical precision. Being around them feels, in the early stages, like finally being known. The psychology is called mirroring, and it is one of the most sophisticated forms of social influence. When someone reflects our identity back to us with accuracy, we bond with them rapidly and deeply. It feels like connection, but in certain patterns, it is actually a form of capture. The false mirror, over time, begins to introduce slight distortions, small reframings, subtle perspectives that begin to shift how you see yourself. Because you trust them so completely, because they have demonstrated they understand you, you absorb these reframings without questioning them. You do not notice the drift, but you are drifting. The mistake is conflating familiarity with safety. Just because someone knows you deeply does not mean their influence on you is accurate. Periodically ask yourself, who do I believe I am after spending time with this person? Does time with them make me feel more like myself or less? Does it expand my sense of possibility or quietly contract it? Your identity should not be something someone else gets to author, even someone who claims to understand it better than you do. Some people do not damage you through what they say. They damage you through what they create around you. The chaos generator lives in a permanent state of crisis, financial emergencies, relationship collapses, career disasters, health scares, and they need you, specifically you, in the center of every storm. The psychology is grounded in nervous system dysregulation. People who grew up in unpredictable environments often become unconsciously addicted to high-intensity situations. Calm feels dangerous to them, stability feels suspicious, and they will, often, without realizing it, generate situations that pull others into urgency. Your mistake is treating every emergency as legitimate. You respond, you drop things, you redirect your attention, your resources, your emotional energy. You tell yourself this is loyalty. But this is where it gets deeper. When you consistently operate as someone else, as stabilizing force, you never stabilize yourself. You pour into a vessel that has a permanent hole in it, and while you are pouring, your own life is pausing. The correction is not to abandon someone in genuine crisis. It is to stop treating manufactured chaos as though it carries the same weight as real emergency. Learn the pattern. Notice the frequency. A true crisis is an interruption. A chaos generator makes interruption the baseline. Guard your attention. What you give your attention to expands, including other people's dysfunction. The sixth type is especially dangerous in professional and intellectual environments, and it operates almost entirely through language. The intellectual underminer is always just slightly more skeptical than you. Every idea you propose has a flaw they immediately identify. Every plan you develop has a risk they cannot stop thinking about. Every success you achieve had more luck in it than you realize, or so they gently suggest. The psychology here is called epistemic authority. By positioning themselves as the more rigorous thinker, in every exchange, they gradually transfer your confidence in your own judgment over to them. You start to run your ideas through their filter before you even act on them. Their internal critic becomes your internal critic. The common mistake, mistaking chronic skepticism for intelligence. Some people are genuinely analytical, but there is a difference between someone who stress tests ideas to strengthen them and someone who stress tests ideas to weaken the person proposing them. One leaves you sharper, the other leaves you hesitant. Start tracking outcomes. When this person's skepticism has historically been correct, and when it has simply been a dampening force, dressed as discernment, you will see a pattern. Let data override social conditioning. Trust your own thinking. It has gotten you further than you give it credit for. And now we arrive at the most insidious type. Because this one operates at the level of your deepest need. Every human being needs to feel seen, accepted, valued. That is not weakness. That is the architecture of being human. The conditional validator knows this, not always consciously, but instinctively. They give you warmth when you behave in ways that serve their needs. They withdraw when you do not. The cycle is subtle, but over time, it is extraordinarily powerful because you begin to organize your behavior, unconsciously, around earning their approval. You lose track of what you actually want because you are too busy managing what they seem to need from you. This is the psychology of intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes certain behaviors compulsive. Unpredictable reward is more powerful than consistent reward. When warmth is reliable, you relax. When warmth is conditional, you become vigilant, you work harder, you bend further, you become a version of yourself shaped entirely by their unpredictable emotional weather. The mistake, believing that if you just figure out the right configuration, the warmth will become unconditional. It will not, because the conditionality is the mechanism. Removing it would remove their leverage. Notice when connection has become a performance. When you are not yourself around someone, but a calculated version of yourself designed to secure their approval, that is not a relationship. That is a cage you volunteered to enter. Here is where we go deeper. Everything you have just heard is about other people, but I want to offer you a harder idea now. An idea that most people resist because it feels unfair. You are not just a victim in these dynamics. You are also a participant, not because you are weak, not because you are naive, but because every single one of these relationships continues because it meets a need in you that you have not yet met for yourself. The comfort saboteur stays close because part of you still wants someone else to define the threshold of what is safe. The permanent victim gets your endless empathy because proving your compassion is how you prove your worth. The conditional validator holds power because some part of you still believes approval from the outside is more real than approval from the inside. This is not self-blame. This is the actual map. Because here is what that means. You have power that you have not claimed yet. Every pattern you have allowed is also a pattern you can interrupt. Not by becoming cold, not by building walls, but by becoming so deeply anchored in your own values, your own voice, your own sense of direction, that other people's dysfunction simply does not find a place to attach. This is not about becoming invulnerable. It is about becoming coherent. A person who knows who they are is genuinely difficult to manipulate, not because they are guarded, because there is nothing left to exploit. Here is the truth that ties everything together, and you may not have expected it to land this way. The most dangerous people in your life are not dangerous because they are powerful. They are dangerous because they are familiar. We tolerate what we normalize. We normalize what we grow up around. And the patterns that first shaped us are the patterns we later recreate in friendships, in partnerships, in professional relationships, because familiarity reads as safety even when it is not. The 7 types you just encountered are not random. You have probably found your way into their orbit because something in that dynamic felt known. And what felt known felt, on some level, like home. The real work, the work beyond recognizing these patterns, is learning to become someone who no longer needs the familiar version of pain. That is not a therapeutic platitude. It is a strategic shift in identity. When you genuinely stop needing what these dynamics give you, the false comfort, the borrowed meaning, the outsourced confidence, these relationships either transform or they fall away on their own. You do not need to declare war. You simply need to outgrow the need. And that is what real protection looks like. Not distance, not suspicion, wholeness. Take a moment before you move on. Think about one relationship in your life. Not the most obvious one, but the one the script made you think of when you did not want it to. Ask yourself honestly, who am I when I am around that person? And who could I be if I stopped organizing myself around their presence? That question is not comfortable. It is not supposed to be. If this gave you something real, not just information, but recognition, comment below with one word, the word that came to mind. When you thought of that relationship, you do not need to explain it. You will know what it means. And if you are the kind of person who takes their own clarity seriously, you already know what the next step is.